4C, associative property. The associative property is similar to the commutative property, but with associative property, it says you can alter the grouping of numbers without changing the result of the operation. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if I were to take 6 plus 5 plus 2, remember parentheses says grouping, right? We're grouping the 5 plus 2. That tells us to add 5 plus 2 first, and then add 6. Well, if I do that, I have 5 plus 2 is 7, plus 6 is 13. If addition is associative, then I can change the grouping and say 6 plus 5 plus 2. And that should also be equal to 13. So 6 plus 5 is 11, plus 2 is 13, and it is. So addition is associative. Or there is an associative property of addition that I can group them however I want. I kind of look at an associative property as a special case of the commutative. Because what am I really doing here? Yeah, here I'm using order of operations that says do these two first, which literally is saying 5 plus 2 plus 6. Right? Order of operations says do what's in the parentheses first, then do that. So it's telling me to go 5 plus 2 plus 6. When I change it to this, 6 plus 5 plus 2, isn't that just the commutative property? It says I can move around the numbers. And both of those come out the same. So the associative property just says, hey, instead of grouping these together, I can group these together, and it's not going to change the result. So addition is associative. What if I have 7 minus 5 minus 1? 7 minus 5 minus 1. Order of operations says 5 minus 1 comes first, gives me 4. 7 minus 4 is 3. Now if I go 7 minus 5 minus 1, that tells me I have to subtract this first. So 7 minus 5 is 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. Subtraction is not associative. And that should make sense with my previous statement that the associative property is really a special case of the commutative property. Remember that subtraction was not commutative, so it also is not associative. You may be asking yourself, why? Why, Mr. Davis, is there a differentiation then? Why don't we just call it all the commutative property? Because you just said that associative property is really just a special case of the commutative property. The reason we do that is because the associative property is a very specific case. It's when you're grouping things together, when you have those parentheses around it, and your order of operations is forcing what happens. Commutative says we move things around. Associative says we move the parentheses around. So what we're grouping together. So it's a small distinction, but it is a distinction. Well, let's try out multiplication. 3 times 7 times 2. 7 times 2 is 14. 14 times 3 is 42. And if I go 3 times 7 times 2. 3 times 7 is 21, times 2 is 42. So multiplication is associative. And notice what happened here now. 7 times 2, 14 times 3. You may have had a little difficulty doing 14 times 3 in your head. You may have looked and said, Mr. Davis, how did you come up with 42 from that? Right? Whereas 3 times 7, 21, multiplying a number by 2 is relatively easy. 21 doubled gives you 42. So that was a much easier calculation, even for something simple like this. So that's one of the powers of the associative property. Just like the commutative property, I can move them I can group things together in such a way that I can do the calculations easier. In this case, it made it something that was much easier to do in my head. Let's try division. Now, if you paid attention to associative property versus commutative property, you should already be saying, Mr. Davis, obviously, division is not going to be associative because it's not commutative. And you'd be right, but let's just go through and verify that. So if I have 12 divided by 6 divided by 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3, 12 divided by 3 is 4. Or if I have 12 divided by 6 divided by 2, 12 divided by 6 is 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1. So yes, amazingly enough, not associative. So therefore we have an associative property of addition and an associative property of multiplication. So let's use this property to rewrite an expression. So what if I have 7 plus 3 plus 4. Look at this, so 7 plus 3 plus 4. 3 plus 4 is 7, plus 7 is 14. If I want to rewrite that using the associative property, I can say that's 7 plus 3 plus 4. And you may have seen this before, not necessarily as shown quite in this way, if you went through some Common Core math. Because what are they doing here? I was like, well, 7 plus 3 plus 4, you're doing 7 plus 7. Well, we're saying, well, really what you want to do is you want to make it into, you want to take part of the other 7 and add it to this first one to get it to 10 so you can do the rest. So by putting 3 with the 7, that got us up to 10, which allowed us to easily add 4. So you've probably seen this before. They might not have referred to it as the associative property. They were just trying to teach you a thought process to get through it. And that's the associative property of addition and multiplication.